I was standing in my kitchen, holding a phone in one hand and a wooden spoon in the other, when my brother's voice turned my whole life into rubble in 11 seconds. "Grandpa left everything to me," Corbin said, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. "The house, the land, the money, all of it. You get nothing, Maren, not one dime." Then he laughed, a soft, satisfied laugh I hadn't heard since we were kids, and he'd just gotten away with something. I didn't know yet that he actually hadn't gotten away with anything at all. My name is Maren Ellis. I'm 34 years old. I run a small bookkeeping business out of a converted garage in Millhaven, Oregon, and until that phone call, I believed my grandfather loved my brother and me equally. I was wrong about a lot of things that year. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 9 and Corbin was 11. Grandpa Walter Voss, everyone called him Grandpa Walt, took us in without hesitation. He ran a small hardware store downtown for 30 years, the kind of place where he knew every customer's name and let kids take a lollipop from the jar by the register, even if they didn't buy anything. He raised us in the same creaky 2-story house on Larch Street, with a porch swing that squeaked and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. But even as a child, I noticed the difference. Corbin got the new bike. I got the one from the church donation box. Corbin got praised for grades that were, frankly, mediocre. I got quiet nods for grades that were excellent. Grandpa never said he loved Corbin more. He didn't have to. It showed in 1,000 small ways: the extra plate at dinner, the longer conversations, the way his eyes lit up differently when Corbin walked into a room. I told myself it didn't matter. I built my own life. I got my accounting degree by working nights at a diner. I never asked Grandpa for money, not once, even when my business almost folded during its second year. Corbin, on the other hand, borrowed from Grandpa constantly, for a truck, for a failed restaurant venture, for a wedding to a woman named Denise that ended in a divorce 18 months later. Grandpa always paid. Grandpa always forgave. 2 years ago, Grandpa's health started slipping. Small things at first, forgetting where he put his glasses, repeating stories. Then bigger things, a fall in the bathroom, a diagnosis of early-stage vascular dementia that terrified all of us. I moved 30 minutes closer to Millhaven so I could check on him twice a week. I brought groceries, refilled his prescriptions, sat with him while he watched his old westerns. Corbin visited on holidays and called it family time. About 8 months before Grandpa passed, something changed. Corbin started visiting more often, not with me, but alone, on weekday afternoons when I was at work. I found out later this was deliberate. At the time, I was just relieved my brother was finally stepping up. I should have asked more questions when Grandpa mentioned, almost offhand, that Corbin's fiancée at the time, a new one, a woman named Sable Whitfield, who worked as a paralegal, had been helping him get his paperwork in order. I remember thinking that was kind of her. I didn't think about what paperwork meant until it was almost too late. Grandpa passed away on a rainy Tuesday in March, quietly, in his sleep, with a half-finished crossword puzzle on his nightstand. I cried for 3 days straight. Corbin cried too, at the funeral, in front of everyone, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief that looked suspiciously new. I didn't judge him for grieving. I judged him for what came next. The will reading was scheduled for the following week at a small law office downtown. That's when Corbin called me, the call that started this story. "You won't get a single dime," he said, like he'd rehearsed it. I asked him how he even knew what was in the will before the official reading. He went quiet for a second too long before hanging up. That silence was the first clue. The second came 3 days later, when I arrived at the law office and found out the attorney handling the estate wasn't Grandpa's longtime lawyer, Mr. Aldous Reyes, who had handled his affairs for over 20 years. Instead, it was someone I'd never met, a younger attorney named Preston Cole, who Sable Whitfield had personally recommended to Corbin for a smoother process. The will Preston Cole read that day left the house, the hardware store property, and Grandpa's savings, nearly $400,000, entirely to Corbin. I received a single sentence: To my granddaughter Maren, I leave my love and my blessing." Everyone in that room looked at me with pity, like I was a woman who'd simply been forgotten. Corbin didn't even try to hide his smile. I didn't cry in that office. Something inside me went very still and very cold instead, because I remembered something. 3 years earlier, before his memory started slipping badly, Grandpa had sat me down at his kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and said, "Maren, I want you to know something. Whatever happens to me, whatever anyone tells you, I want things split fair between you and your brother. Fair, you hear me? I already had Aldous draw it up that way." I remembered it because it was such an unusual thing for him to say out of nowhere. At the time, I thought he was just being sentimental. Now I understood. He was warning me. I called Mr. Reyes that same night. He was retired by then, living 2 hours away, but he remembered Grandpa well. "Walter came to my office 5 years ago," he told me over the phone, his voice tight with confusion. "We drew up a will together, 50-50 split between you and your brother, with a small trust for the church he loved. I have a copy in my archives. I don't understand why another attorney would be involved at all. Walter never mentioned switching lawyers to me." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down every strange detail from the past 8 months. Corbin's sudden increase in solo visits, Sable's convenient recommendation of a new lawyer, Grandpa's declining memory, which made him legally vulnerable to influence, the suspicious timing of a new will appearing right as his mental state worsened. I drove to Mr. Reyes's office the next morning and got a certified copy of the original 2021 will. 50-50, just as he'd said, with Grandpa's actual signature and 2 witnesses I recognized, his old friends from the church bowling league, both still alive, both willing to testify they'd witnessed him sign it with a clear mind. I confronted Corbin 2 days later, not with anger, but with quiet, deliberate calm. I met him at a coffee shop, recorded nothing, just watched his face as I laid the copy of the original will on the table between us. "Explain this," I said. His face went pale, then defensive. "Grandpa changed his mind later. People update their wills, Maren. That's not a crime." "Then why did nobody know? Why a new lawyer neither of us had ever heard of? Why did Sable pick him? And why did Grandpa's mental state happen to be at its worst exact when this new will was supposedly signed?" He didn't answer. He just told me to talk to his lawyer if I had a problem, and walked out, leaving his coffee untouched. I didn't want a courtroom war. I wanted the truth, and I wanted it to come from people who couldn't deny it. So I did something patient instead of loud. I hired an estate attorney of my own, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ilana Brandt, and I requested a formal medical and cognitive evaluation timeline from Grandpa's doctor, cross-referenced with the exact date on the new will. The date on the second will was 11 days after a documented hospital visit where Grandpa's own physician had noted, in writing, patient exhibiting significant short-term memory impairment and occasional disorientation. Family should closely monitor any legal or financial decisions. Preston Cole, the new attorney, had never once requested a cognitive capacity assessment before witnessing that signature, a basic legal safeguard that Mr. Reyes always used, and one that would have been standard practice for any competent estate lawyer handling an elderly client with a documented diagnosis. Ilana filed a petition to contest the will based on lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. During discovery, phone records showed something Corbin hadn't expected anyone to find: a string of texts between Sable and Preston Cole from months before the new will was signed, discussing getting Walter's paperwork handled before things get complicated, and referencing needing witnesses who wouldn't ask too many questions. Sable, it turned out, wasn't even Corbin's fiancée at that point. They'd secretly reconciled after their breakup specifically, she later admitted under oath, because Corbin had promised her a share of the inheritance once the estate settled, in exchange for arranging the new will. The hearing was quiet, not dramatic like a movie. No shouting, no dramatic exit. Just a judge listening to medical records, comparing signatures, listening to Mr. Reyes testify about the original 2021 will, and watching Preston Cole squirm through questions about why he'd never conducted a capacity evaluation. Corbin sat beside his attorney, staring at the table the entire time, refusing to look at me. The judge ruled the second will invalid due to undue influence and questionable execution, reinstating the original 2021 will Grandpa had made with Mr. Reyes, the 50-50 split, with the small trust to the church. Preston Cole was referred to the state bar for an ethics investigation into failing basic capacity safeguards with a documented vulnerable client. Sable was named in a separate civil complaint for her role in arranging the fraudulent document, though prosecutors ultimately declined criminal charges due to insufficient evidence of who physically guided Grandpa's hand versus who simply benefited from his confusion, a distinction that haunted me because it meant true legal justice, in the fullest sense, never fully arrived. What arrived instead was something quieter and, in its own way, more complete. The truth, spoken out loud, in front of everyone, on the record, forever. Corbin didn't go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because this isn't a story about revenge fantasies. It's about what real consequences actually look like. He lost the case. He lost half the inheritance he thought he'd stolen outright. He lost Sable, who left town within a month once the money didn't come as easily as promised. He lost the respect of nearly everyone in Millhaven who had known Grandpa Walt, because word travels fast in a small town, and nobody there forgot how Grandpa Walt used to slip lollipops to kids for free. Losing the family's trust, in a town like ours, was its own kind of sentence. The hardest conversation came 6 weeks after the ruling, when Corbin showed up at my house unannounced, standing on my porch in the rain, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I didn't think you'd actually fight it," he said. "I thought you'd just accept it, like you always accept everything." "That's the problem, Corbin," I told him. "I spent my whole life accepting things quietly so nobody would think I was difficult. This time, I decided the truth mattered more than being easy to deal with." He didn't apologize that night, not really, just muttered something about needing money and being desperate and Sable pushing him into it. I didn't slam the door in his face, but I didn't invite him in either. Some relationships you don't destroy on purpose. You just stop pretending there's something they're not. With my half of the estate, I didn't buy anything extravagant. I paid off my business loan. I fixed the porch swing at the Larch Street house, which I chose to keep instead of sell, because it still smells faintly like cinnamon if you stand in the kitchen at the right time of evening. And I started a small scholarship fund at the community college in Grandpa's name for kids who grew up the way we did, without parents, raised by someone else's tired, loving hands. It wasn't a grand gesture, it was just mine, and it was honest, and it felt like something Grandpa would have quietly approved of, the way he approved of things, without ever needing anyone to notice. I saw Corbin once more, at a grocery store checkout line last spring. We nodded at each other. Neither of us said anything. It wasn't hatred anymore, it was just distance, the kind that happens naturally when trust breaks and nobody quite knows how to rebuild something that took 30 years to crack. I think about Grandpa often, especially on quiet evenings on that fixed-up porch swing. I think about the tea, the warning he gave me at the kitchen table years before any of this happened, like some part of him already knew what might come. I think about how the truth doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in a stack of medical records, a retired lawyer's memory, and a judge's quiet ruling on a Tuesday afternoon. It's not always loud, but it's real, and it's enough. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the people who wrong us rarely announce their guilt. They smile at funerals. They cry real tears while planning fake documents. But patience, documentation, and quiet persistence can uncover almost anything eventually. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't punishment at all. It's simply refusing to let a lie become the permanent version of the truth.